I built everything from the ground up: the homes, the business, the brand. By 58, I'd earned more than most men dream of. And then she filed. No warning, no conversation, just accusations, lawyers, and a freeze on everything with my name on it. Anata took the mansion, the company, and convinced the court I was a danger to my own kids. It was surgical, not a messy betrayal, but a clean, bloodless execution. She thought I'd crawl away, but she underestimated one thing: I don't vanish. I recalibrate. While she posted curated grief and drank champagne in my house, I sat in a one-bedroom apartment with a hidden camera ticking on my wrist, and every file backed into a digital safe. It wasn't rage that saved me. It was patience. I didn't just survive her. I erased her lies, so one move at a time. Like, subscribe, and share if you've ever been betrayed by someone who smiled the whole way through. Comment where you're watching from. I read everyone. I remember precisely the moment the world shifted beneath my feet. Though on the surface, nothing looked different. It was early October, a chill in the air, leaves whispering outside my office windows. I was seated behind the broad mahogany desk I had purchased when the business first began, the one I told myself would always serve as a monument to my victories. My hands clasped a cup of black coffee, steam rising faintly, and I was reading projected figures for next quarter's developments when my assistant slid an envelope across the desk. No flourish, no hesitation, just a plain manila folder, edges crisp, weight deliberate. Inside were the legal filings. Anata had submitted for divorce. The petition read like a surgical incision: precise, unemotional, determined. Assets to be split. Custody to her. A freeze on my accounts. The language was merciless. She sought full control of our properties, all vehicles, half my stake in the company, and she asked the court to deny me access to a single banking line. They claimed precaution. I recognized the terms of war. She did not call. She did not warn. She deployed. I stared at her name, Anata Langston, at the signature line, as though that ink could justify betrayal. At 58, I have lived long enough to see men surrender under far less strain, but I had built from ground zero. The Langston Empire was not a house of cards. It was granite and steel carved in grit and negotiation, reified by deals I closed with my own hands. She stepped into my world, romanticized its glow, and then drew a blade at its core. In the days after the petition, I withdrew from every press circle, unspooled my schedule, emptied my calendar. The cameras that once captured my premieres, my public speeches, the philanthropic galas, they all paused. She began the narrative-writing campaign. In interviews, private friends, social media, she painted a portrait of me as volatile, unhinged, controlling. She claimed hardship and fear. She twisted the truth. The public, ever eager for drama, leaned in. Meanwhile, in the courtroom, she moved like a strategist. The judge, persuaded by sympathetic counsel, granted her the freeze order. My accounts, decades of earnings, profits, reserves, all locked behind screens that read, "Access denied." The words glowed cold in dim light as I watched them. I felt as though I were looking through a window as my entire life was being erased. No withdrawals, no transfers, no checks cleared. The financial arteries of my empire were constricted. I was suffocating by the system she had orchestrated. They told me it was precaution, a temporary measure. I sensed the trap, because in wealth freezes are not temporary. They are siege. They choke cash flow, annihilate credibility, isolate your options. When the money stops moving, even allies start drifting. Creditors whisper. Employees hesitate, vendors delay. The illusion of stability cracks. I was exiled overnight. From the opulent suburban mansion, I moved into a one-bedroom apartment downtown. No view, no grand entrance, just a narrow window, a modest desk, a bed pressed against one wall, a small kitchenette. It was anonymity by design. I became smaller in space but not in resolve. In that exile, I planned. In that stark simplicity, I sharpened. To cope, I dug through every contract, every ledger, every corporate record archived in servers I still controlled. I retrieved emails, phone logs, transaction trails. I tracked the shadow routes she had used to reroute assets, offshore trusts, shell entities, hidden side accounts. I knew she attempted to sever every visible link to me, but every wire leaves a signature. Every account has a footprint. I became archaeologist and detective both, excavating her transfers and pointing them to buried compartments in her empire. I also pressed on the emotional wounds. When she removed our children from the shared home, I lost my children's laughter echoing through halls I had built to protect them. Chloe's sketches once lined my office wall, her small hand tracing the outline of a building she imagined I would design. Ethan's voice used to call me Dad at bedtime, a simple sacred bridge between our lives. They were now in her custody, acting like they were hers to claim. I felt hollow, but I felt resolved. Amid my isolation, I touched the only tangible remnant she overlooked, the wristwatch she had once sent me for a birthday, diamond-accented, understated, luxurious. In its face, she saw only elegance. Underneath, I'd embedded a micro-camera, synced to a secure drive she assumed I surrendered with every other asset. While she puffed her chest in public appearances, I wore that watch every day in that apartment. It recorded boardroom conversations, conference calls, her whispered counsel with her new legal team. The very construction she neglected became my dagger. Each night, after the city lights dimmed, I combed through recordings. I listened for her lies. I cataloged them. I time-stamped them. I merged them, overlapped them, so they would form evidence she could never erase. The safe codes, the private wires, the whispers of hidden transfers, every one of them was preserved. She believed the battle was done. She believed I would collapse under the weight of public verdict. She believed that by the time war touched the boardroom, she would hold the moral advantage. But she misread me. Misread the deeper layers. I studied the routes she chose. I marked the properties she claimed. She turned my mansion into her ceremonial throne. She paraded through my life's acquisitions as though she had the right to distribute them as spoils. She redecorated rooms in my name, sold art pieces, reassigned property deeds to shell corporations bearing her new name. She changed signage, changed locks. Staffers were told to address her as the matriarch of Langston Legacy. I watched from afar. My corporate offices, the glass towers where my empire first gained respect, she sought to drive me out. She pursued board seats, attempted hostile takeovers, whispered to minority shareholders, planted seeds of doubt in executive ranks. Her play was audacious, seized control of the business, recast it under her branding, pushed me into obscurity, and claimed the narrative that she rescued the business from his tyranny. She worked beneath the veneer of legality. She cloaked her ambition in victimhood. I never lost sight of timeline. She launched pieces of the assault in sequence: emotional public smear, legal siege, asset freeze, boardroom infiltration. By December, in her mind, the final step would be exile. Socially, financially, spiritually. Yet even as I felt the ground shift, even as every public record declared me a loser, I held faith in one ghost of power she believed she severed, the archive in that watch, the clips she would desperately try to destroy, the footage she never knew existed. I held the evidence in cassette of data, in fragments she had never suspected. She would not erase the truth if she couldn't find it. From that small apartment, I plotted the edges of comeback. I positioned myself, legally, financially, psychologically, not to beg for crumbs or negotiate peace, but to exact return. I would draw her out. I would provoke her moves. I would force her into transactions she could not refuse. I would expose her, and I would claim the final move. I am not the victim she painted. I am the reckoning she never saw coming. The apartment walls were paper thin. I could hear the couple next door arguing over something petty. Groceries, maybe. The heater ticked like an old clock. My leather shoes echoed too loud on the laminate floor. In the mansion, silence meant control. Here, it felt like exposure. But I wasn't here to feel comfortable. I was here to prepare for war. My days followed a ritual. Wake at 5, cold shower, black coffee. No sugar, no softness. I'd sit at the small desk with the blinds half open and begin sorting through everything Anata left behind. Not her apologies. There were none. Not memories. They had no use here. I scoured the digital shadows she didn't realize she cast. I had copies of the internal company documents, board minutes, emails she thought were deleted, voice notes she left on shared devices. Every move she made, trying to reposition herself as the true owner of Langston Properties, was documented. The transfer of assets, the payment to a former executive for inside leverage, even the NDA she made her assistant sign. I had a scanned version of the original draft with metadata pointing directly back to her. Anata had always been charismatic, photogenic, the type of woman who never seemed to sweat even under pressure. She once told me, "Perception is survival." She lived by that. When the divorce news hit the press, she staged a photo of herself outside the mansion, flanked by the children, a somber smile on her face. She wore white, symbol of peace, of course. The article headline read, "Mother of Two Battles. Quietly for freedom after years of control." She'd weaponized perception, not truth. It was around this time that I began assembling my own narrative, not for the public yet, but for the courts, the press, and the people she had manipulated. I wasn't going to respond with a tearful video or a press release. No, I was going to build a file so damning, so precise, that when I dropped it, it would detonate. But there was still one problem: no access to my own fortune. The court freeze had immobilized every account linked to my name. She knew this. It was strategic. She wanted me to drown quietly in legal debt while she bled me dry. But what she didn't know, what almost no one knew, was that a year before our separation, I had set up an emergency trust. A failsafe, not because I didn't trust her. Back then, I simply didn't trust anyone. It was a corporate reflex. The trust had only one biometric access point, my fingerprint verified through the digital safe in my name, located in a private banking office in Zurich. It wasn't vast, not enough to rebuild an empire, but enough to regain footing, to hire my own legal assassins, to make moves she couldn't anticipate. In late October, I flew out under the radar. No public trail, no assistant, just me and a single carry-on. Zurich in the fall is cold, polite, and impossibly quiet. Like the people there know everyone is hiding something. At the private bank, I scanned my print, entered a 12-digit code, and watched as the steel safe split open with a hiss. Inside was a single black flash drive, a leather folder with 4 names, and a handwritten letter from myself, dated 14 months earlier. It said, "If you're here, you already know who tried to take it all. You also know how this ends. But it only works if you wait. Be patient. Move like fog." That day, I became someone else. Not the polished mogul, not the media-guarded father. I became the patient storm. Back in the States, I moved quickly. Quietly. I hired a forensic accountant, the best kind, the kind who used to work for the IRS before they got bored and went private. Within a week, he had discovered 3 shell corporations tied directly to Anata's inner circle, offshore, Cayman Islands, all recently activated, all receiving quiet payments from Langston Properties. She wasn't just trying to take my name. She was gutting the company and building a new empire in its skeleton, all before the divorce was finalized. Meanwhile, I used the flash drive from Zurich to gain leverage over one of the sitting board members she'd convinced to flip. He was a snake, but like most snakes, he valued self-preservation. I gave him 2 choices: stand down and walk away quietly, or be named in a federal tax investigation I could trigger with one forwarded file. He folded fast. The cracks in her boardroom alliance started showing. But this wasn't about reclaiming the company. Not yet. It was about making her feel untouchable just long enough to slip, because people like Anata, once they believe they've won, stop checking the locks behind them. That's what happened at the charity gala. It was late November. She was photographed on the arm of a venture capitalist, smiling like she had already rewritten her past. The event was at the Langston estate, my estate. She wore the same diamond necklace I bought her for our 10th anniversary.
The same dress, in fact.
I stood across the street in the back seat of a town car, unrecognizable in a black coat and graying beard, and I watched her host. Inside the gala, my hidden contacts, 3 former employees still loyal to me, gathered footage, not just of Anata parading around, but of her making statements about the company. False ones, promises to investors she couldn't legally make. Admissions, really, disguised as ambition. The camera in my watch, now linked to a cloud server, captured it all through a relay device one of my people wore on their wrist. We were building her coffin, 1 inch at a time. That night, when I returned to the apartment, I didn't feel satisfaction. I felt readiness. I opened the children's drawing I kept folded in my briefcase. A house, stick figures, the word home written in crayon. Chloe had drawn it years ago. She once told me, "This is our forever house." I don't know what she thinks now. I don't know what Anata has told her. But I kept that drawing because it reminded me what Anata tried to take, and what I would protect. She thought this was about money. She thought it was about image. She forgot what happens when a builder has to tear everything down to make something unshakable. Anatta once said the most dangerous men are the ones who stay quiet when they're humiliated. That was before she ever imagined humiliating me. Now, she was about to learn what silence really meant. December came fast, and with it, a chill that crept under the skin. The kind of cold that doesn't just touch you, it settles in. I was still in that one-bedroom apartment, my self-imposed bunker, but it had begun to feel less like exile and more like a command center. The walls had maps pinned to them, diagrams, asset charts, color-coded movement logs. I knew every business contact she'd reached out to since the filing. I knew what she offered, what she promised, and what she threatened. She had grown careless. The gala had been more than symbolic. It was a strategic blunder. Cameras captured her making claims about Langston properties that directly contradicted her sworn statements to the court. My legal team was still under wraps, working behind sealed doors, compiling evidence, tying her missteps to concrete violations. But the board? That was still a battlefield. Half the seats were either neutralized or still leaning her way, convinced that aligning with Anatta meant aligning with the future of the brand. That illusion was about to fracture. One morning, as the city still slept under gray skies, I made a call to a name few people outside the upper crust would recognize: Marcus Hale. A legend in legal circles, known for dismantling empires with a paper trail and a smirk. He didn't advertise. He didn't appear in glossy magazines. But the last 3 CEOs who tried to silence whistleblowers, he was behind their fall. We met in person at a private club on the edge of town. No security, no fanfare, just a fire burning in the hearth and a table between us. "You don't want to win," Marcus said after reviewing my case files. "You want to eviscerate her." "I want the truth public," I said. "And I want her to know it was me that put it there." He smiled slightly. "Then we don't negotiate. We spent the next 2 weeks building a legal payload, not just divorce retaliation. That would be petty. We went deeper. Corporate fraud, malicious defamation, parental alienation, perjury, fiduciary misconduct, all backed with timestamps, recordings, financial statements, sworn witness accounts. By the time Marcus's team had compiled the files, it was 4 inches thick and more dangerous than anything money could buy. But here's the catch: we didn't serve her. Not yet. Instead, we leaked. Not documents, not accusations, just enough questions. Strategic whispers to journalists. Anonymous tip-offs to financial compliance regulators. A few internal memos that found their way to the inboxes of board members. The boardroom that once laughed behind her confidence began to itch with doubt. Then came the investor pullout. One of our biggest legacy backers, a private equity group in Manhattan, quietly pulled funding from a Langston Properties expansion project Anatta had championed. Publicly, they cited concerns about leadership integrity. Privately, I knew Marcus had arranged a controlled leak to their compliance officer. That triggered the ripple. 3 major development partners called to delay projects. 2 suppliers asked to renegotiate contracts. Suddenly, Langston Properties, the empire she tried to wear like a designer coat, was bleeding credibility. And she felt it. That week, I received a call I never expected from her. I stared at the name on my screen for a long time before answering. "David," she said, voice soft like old days. "Yeah, we need to talk." It wasn't an apology. It was fear in disguise. "I'll have my lawyer reach out," I replied, and hung up. She tried again the next day, through mutual friends. Through my old executive assistant, even a cryptic message sent via one of the kids' school counselors. Each time the message was the same. She was open to finding a peaceful solution. She wanted to avoid any more public damage. She was trying to reclaim a story that no longer belonged to her. But I wasn't interested in peace. Not anymore. By mid-December, my legal team was ready. We drafted a comprehensive motion that outlined every violation she had committed, not only in the marriage and divorce, but also as acting head of the company. It included evidence of misappropriation, intentional deception in court, fraudulent restructuring of corporate assets, and manipulation of public image for personal gain at the expense of shareholder value. It was a time bomb. Still, we waited, not because we lacked the will, but because we knew she was planning something final. Desperation breeds boldness, and Anatta was nothing if not bold when cornered. I watched her begin to plan a press conference, An exclusive event, closed door, supposedly to address the rumors and clarify the truth. She booked the venue. She reached out to a journalist I knew personally. She even floated a hint that she might reveal something shocking about me, an attempt to regain the upper hand. What she didn't know was that I had already obtained a copy of her speech. One of her inner circle assistants, fed up with being treated like a servant and paid like an intern, sold it to a contact of mine. She was going to accuse me of financial coercion, claim I used offshore accounts to hide marital assets, and hint that I had connections to blackmail threats against her. It was slander, constructed, weaponized, and about to be unleashed, so we made our move. The day before her press conference, we filed everything. Publicly. Federal court. Civil filings. Corporate complaints. All simultaneously. By the time she stepped on stage, she was already a defendant in 3 lawsuits, named in 2 federal investigations, and under review by the board's independent ethics committee. And just to make it clear, we didn't stop her from speaking, we let her stand there, cameras rolling, lights on, smiling as if nothing had changed. And then one of the journalists, hand-fed by Marcus, asked, "Can you comment on the lawsuits filed this morning? Do you deny the fraud allegations?" Her face cracked. Just a flicker. But it was there. That footage went viral. Overnight, the public image she'd spent months crafting began to rot. People don't rally behind the powerful when they're accused of stealing. They don't cry for millionaires being investigated for fraud. They watch. They judge. They repost. I watched the video from my apartment, volume low, drink in hand. It wasn't joy I felt. It was precision. Justice isn't loud. It's surgical, and we were only halfway through. The news broke in layers. First, there were the financial headlines. Dry, clinical, Langston Properties faces fraud allegations as lawsuits surface. Then came the mainstream press. Socialite CEO accused of corporate theft by former husband. But it was the gossip blogs and influencer reels that finally sank their teeth in. Anata Langston's empire in crisis. Was it all a lie? The same public that once adored her began circling like vultures. She had built a life online, curated it like a showroom. Luxury skincare routines, motherhood insights, motivational quotes over filtered sunsets. But now those posts turned into exhibits in a trial of public opinion. Screenshots were dissected. Collaborations were paused. Brand deals were ghosting her inbox, and I stayed silent? I didn't need to gloat. The damage was already spreading through the roots of everything she touched. Her face, once synonymous with poised elegance, was now a question mark. Her empire, a question of ethics. She didn't understand yet that in the court of legacy, truth takes its time, but once it starts rolling, it doesn't stop. Behind the scenes, Anata began scrambling. Her legal team filed motions to suppress evidence, discredit my recordings, and argue that I had violated her privacy. But we were ready. Every capture had a signed release. Every witness had been prepped. Every timestamp preserved. What she didn't understand, or couldn't admit, was that I had anticipated this years ago. Back when things were still good, I started noticing small things. A receipt that didn't match. A side business she swore she never launched. A bank account in her maiden name. It wasn't paranoia. It was preparation. I knew that money changes people. But more importantly, it reveals them. So I had begun building my digital safe before the marriage even began to unravel. And now, that safe, protected behind a biometric lock in Zurich, was my fortress. But beneath the strategy, beneath the wins, there was still something raw. The kids. Chloe had stopped calling. Ethan barely picked up when I rang. I knew Anata was poisoning the well, not through overt lies but subtle omissions, suggesting I was busy, implying the lawsuits were a sign I was unstable, claiming that Daddy's just trying to hurt Mommy. I didn't want them dragged through this, but I also refused to be erased. I sent letters. Handwritten, not typed. No accusations. Just stories, memories, the time we built a treehouse. The night Chloe had a fever and I held her for hours until she slept. Ethan's first soccer goal and how I framed the picture in my office. I didn't beg for love. I reminded them what it had once been. I didn't expect an immediate response. I just needed to anchor something in them. Something real that Anata couldn't overwrite. Mid-December approached, and with it, the public fallout. One morning, I received a call from a number I didn't recognize. I answered, expecting another journalist fishing for a quote. Mr. Langston? The voice was measured, masculine, professional. I'm calling on behalf of the board. He meant Langston Properties. We'd like to schedule a meeting, discreetly. Some of the members are reconsidering their position. That was the moment I knew the tide had turned. For months I had allowed Anata to parade as the face of the brand. I let her speak for it, manage it, claim it. I knew her control was rooted in confidence, not legal standing, so I waited. And now the board, watching her image disintegrate and investors retreat, began looking for the original architect, the builder, the founder. The meeting was held in a neutral location, a private floor of a high-rise in the financial district, glass walls, no names on the doors, just me, 3 board members, and a non-disclosure agreement. They asked questions, hard ones. They wanted to know what came next, what I would do if reinstated, what would happen to the company if they ousted her. I didn't offer promises. I offered clarity. I'm not here for revenge, I told them. I'm here to restore integrity. This company was built to last beyond scandal, beyond marriage, beyond personality cults. It was built to serve clients, not egos. They nodded. They didn't commit. But I saw the shift. Anata, meanwhile, began to implode privately. I received a tip from a former household employee. She was firing staff without notice, accusing them of leaking information, drinking late into the night. She had barricaded herself in the mansion, blinds closed, PR team on standby. Her influencer friends were distancing themselves. Her social feeds went silent. And then she made her first mistake in desperation. She filed a countersuit, claiming that I had manipulated her into the marriage under false pretenses, that I had abused her emotionally, that the money she took wasn't theft. It was survival. That move? It detonated her remaining credibility. Within 48 hours, media outlets picked it apart. Her timelines didn't add up. Financial experts pointed out her luxury spending in the months after filing, not the actions of someone fleeing an abuser. And then someone dug up her archived interviews, ones where she bragged about our perfect marriage, about how I built everything with my bare hands, about how we never fought. We only built. They looped those clips against her court claims. It wasn't just contradiction. It was demolition. The court of public opinion closed in, and this time I didn't have to say a word. Still, part of me couldn't help but remember what we once had. Before all the rot, there was a time when we stood on the balcony of our first home, her in a silk robe, me in a t-shirt and coffee breath, dreaming aloud about what the future would hold. She said, "Let's build something no one can take from us." It turns out, she was the only one who ever tried. I walked through a park one morning, one I used to take the kids to, and sat on a bench watching leaves fall. A woman nearby recognized me, said she was sorry for everything, that I didn't deserve it. I nodded, thanked her. But inside I wasn't looking for sympathy. I was thinking about how something so beautiful could turn so venomous. And I was thinking about how close we were to the end. I pulled out my phone, opened the secure drive, and watched one of the final recordings. Anata in the mansion, bragging about how she manipulated her lawyer, how she faked a breakdown to stall a hearing, how she was 10 moves ahead. I paused the clip. She wasn't ahead anymore. There's a particular kind of silence that settles just before something breaks. Not the quiet of peace, but the pause of restraint. That's what December felt like. Everyone was watching, waiting, wondering when the story would finally shatter wide open. And in that tension I found calm. Anata had gone dark. No interviews, no posts, no press. Her inner circle, once a halo of curated luxury and passive-aggressive praise, had evaporated. Some had deleted pictures with her. Others gave vague statements like, "We're praying for everyone involved." The industry had moved on, and when the lights shift, people scramble to avoid shadows. But I wasn't interested in watching her fall. I was focused on what came next. The legal battles were well underway. Depositions were scheduled. Financial subpoenas were flying like knives across her empire. One by one, I was reclaiming the narrative she stole. But I hadn't yet reclaimed what mattered most: the company, the house, the name, and the children. Chloe finally responded to one of my letters, a small note written in pencil. Simple, careful. It said, "Hi, Dad. I don't know what's true anymore, but I miss you." Chloe, I stared at that note longer than I should have. Not because it broke me, it didn't. It reminded me what hadn't yet been corrupted, what still needed protecting. Anata may have weaponized everything else, but the truth was starting to leak through the cracks. And children, they're intuitive. They know when love is real and when control is painted to look like care. It was time for the next phase. The board at Langston Properties had seen enough. After a tense 2-hour closed-door session, they voted to suspend Anata's interim leadership pending an ethics investigation. It wasn't a full victory, not yet, but it was a crack in the dam. They invited me to consult informally on operations. That was their way of saying, "We know we backed the wrong horse." I accepted, not out of pride, but because the brand mattered. I'd built it before she even knew what a deed transfer was. Langston wasn't just a company, it was a symbol, a name built in steel and grit and 10,000 miles of driving to make meetings in the early days. She wore it like a trophy. I bore it like a scar. During that first consultation, I noticed something strange. The numbers didn't line up. Anata's expansion projects had drained more capital than reported. My forensic team dove in, and what they found was staggering. She'd created an entire secondary ledger. False invoices, phantom subcontractors, inflated costs. Nearly $12 million in siphoned funds routed through shell companies under a holding firm in Bermuda. The digital trail was meticulous, but not perfect. We caught it all. I now had the final weapon, irrefutable proof of corporate fraud on a scale that could bring federal charges. And that's when I paused. I sat in my apartment, lights low, laptop screen glowing, the numbers staring back at me, and I asked myself, what's enough? Not forgiveness. That was never on the table. But did I want to destroy her completely? To leave her publicly disgraced, financially ruined, socially exiled? Or did I want something more quiet, more personal? And then I remembered what she said the day we bought our first investment property. Before the fame, before the cameras. "If I ever betray you," she laughed, "you'll bury me with paperwork, won't you?" I hadn't laughed then. I'm not laughing now. If you've ever watched someone weaponize love and lies, drop it in the comments. Like, share, and subscribe if you believe truth always finds its way back. Tell me where you're watching from, because this war isn't over. The next morning, I had my legal team draft a final civil motion, a personal one. It demanded full reinstatement of my ownership stake, legal control of Langston Properties, and a permanent restraining order against Anata regarding the company's operations. Attached were hundreds of pages of evidence, audio, video, bank trails, false filings, NDA breaches, and violations of fiduciary duty. It was nuclear. But before we filed, I made one final move. I requested a private meeting. Just me and her. No lawyers. No cameras. At first she refused, but curiosity, or maybe ego, got the better of her. We met at a neutral location, a private room in a luxury hotel downtown, one we had once stayed in during better times. The irony was not lost on me. She arrived looking tired. Not broken, not beaten, just hollow. The fire was dimmed. The mask thinner. She didn't speak right away. She waited for me to, so I started simple. "I'm not here to scream. I'm not here to settle. I'm here to offer you a choice." She crossed her arms, skeptical. "What choice?" I placed a folder on the table. Thick. Heavy. Every lie she ever told, in black and white. It sat between us like a loaded gun. "You can fight this," I said. "Drag it out, bleed more, lose everything. Or you can walk quietly, leave the company, drop your claims, let it end. And what?" she said, voice cold. "You get everything?" "No," I said. "I get back what was mine. You get a future without prison time." Her face shifted. She realized this wasn't a threat. It was a sentence with a suspended execution. She didn't respond. Not then. She stood, picked up the folder, walked out. I didn't know which way she'd go. Not yet. But I knew she finally saw the real cost of what she'd done. That night, I returned home and opened Chloe's note again. "I miss you." Me too, I thought. But some things you don't fix with apologies, you fix them with truth. And truth I had in abundance. 3 days passed after our silent confrontation. No texts, no emails, no counterfilings, just an eerie calm that suggested Anata was either preparing something or conceding. Then came the headline. Anata Langston steps down amid ongoing investigations. Former CEO cites desire to focus on family. There it was, the signal flare of quiet surrender. No apologies, no admissions. Just a graceful retreat written by a PR agency that specializes in high-gloss exit strategies. It was exactly the kind of statement Anata had built her brand on. Hollow, vague, manipulatively poised. But beneath that, I saw it clearly. She was pulling back. She'd seen the evidence. She knew the fallout would be total if she pushed forward. What surprised me wasn't that she folded, it was that she folded alone. No legal delay tactics. No emotional blackmail. No press tour to frame herself as the wounded matriarch. Just silence, until the letter came. It arrived at my apartment by private courier, sealed in the kind of envelope used for cease and desist threats or final negotiations. But inside, it wasn't legal. It was handwritten. 8 pages. No signature at the bottom, just a date. It wasn't an apology. It was a justification. She wrote about how the marriage had been cold in its final years, how she felt like a decorative piece in an empire she didn't build, how my silence suffocated her in rooms where she craved admiration. She described our home as a palace with no soul, our partnership as a contract more than a connection. Then, in a single paragraph, she admitted it, that she took the assets not just out of greed, but out of anger, a desperate need to feel like she had something that couldn't be taken away. I knew I was burning the bridge, and she wrote, but at least I was holding the match. She never said sorry, but she said enough. I folded the letter and placed it in the fireproof safe with the rest of the archive, not because it mattered legally, but because in war, even the surrender deserves to be documented. By the end of that week, my legal team filed the final motion to reclaim full ownership of Langston Properties. With Anata stepping down and the fraud evidence publicly documented, the board voted unanimously in favor of reinstating me. I walked back into the headquarters on a cold Monday morning. The security guard who used to greet me with a nod now stood straighter, saluted. The front lobby, once plastered with her magazine covers and charity gala snapshots, had already been stripped bare. It was as if she'd never been there, and yet her fingerprints remained. In the architecture of the office layout, the white marble floors she insisted on installing, the over-designed minimalist furniture that looked impressive but felt uncomfortable. I didn't erase it. Not yet. Let the ghost linger. Let every employee remember who almost destroyed everything, and who came back to rebuild. I called an all-hands meeting. I didn't rehearse the speech. I didn't have a teleprompter, just a microphone, a room full of people, and the name I had taken back. I won't talk about the past today, I said. You've seen it. You've survived it. And I'm not here to ask for trust. I'm here to earn it again, from the bottom up. The room was silent. No applause, just eyes locked on mine. I preferred it that way. Applause fades. Attention endures. That week, I began the internal cleanup. Financial audits, internal reviews, quiet terminations of those who colluded with Anata's games. I wasn't cruel, just clear. The era of smoke and mirrors was over. Langston Properties would return to the principles that built it: precision, grit, and integrity. But the real challenge was still personal. Rebuilding my relationship with the kids wasn't something I could do through legal filings or public statements. I had to start small, so I did something I hadn't done in months. I showed up at their school. Not in a chauffeur-driven car, not with an entourage, just me, a man in a coat with his hands in his pockets waiting at the edge of the pickup line. Chloe spotted me first. She didn't run to me, but she didn't turn away either. She walked slowly, like she was crossing a frozen lake, afraid it might crack. Ethan followed, unsure. "I'm not here to make you pick sides," I said gently. "I just wanted to see you. That's all?" They nodded. Chloe bit her lip. Ethan looked at the ground. Then quietly, Chloe asked, "Are you still in the apartment?" "Yes," I said. She pulled something from her backpack. It was a photograph. Us, the 4 of us, from a beach vacation 3 years ago. Everyone was laughing. "You can keep it," she said. "I don't think Mom wants it anymore." That hit harder than any courtroom victory. I didn't ask questions. I didn't press. I just nodded, took the photo, and thanked her. It was a start, a thread connecting us across the damage, a thread I wouldn't let go of. Over the next few days, things moved fast. The mansion, legally still mine, was vacated. Anita moved out without notice, leaving behind everything she couldn't carry. Art, furniture, even a drawer full of letters I had written her during our first years together. She left them all, unopened. I walked through the empty house the following weekend, room by room. The echo was louder now. No voices, no pretense, just space. In the living room, I found a single item she hadn't touched. The children's drawing Chloe had once pinned to the corkboard. Our forever house. Stick figures, crooked trees, sun in the corner. I took it down carefully. Folded it into my coat pocket. I didn't need to hang it up again. I just needed to carry it. People talk about revenge like it's an act. A strike, a fire, a scream. But real revenge, it's quiet. It's the sound of footsteps returning to what someone tried to steal. It's the feeling of your name, cleared without needing to shout. It's the weight of what they thought they buried, standing up and walking again. And I was walking. By late December, the city had taken on that bleak kind of winter stillness, all noise muffled under frost, motion slowed by cold. But inside the Langston Tower, everything was moving again. I'd reinstated the executive team, rehired those who had been wrongfully terminated, and launched an internal audit that would make any regulator jealous. It wasn't revenge anymore. It was reconstruction. Langston Properties had always been more than glass and concrete. It was a projection of discipline, resilience, the kind of organization built to weather economic storms, hostile markets, even divorce. But what it wasn't built to survive was ego. Anita had tried to make the company reflect her. Smooth on the surface, hollow at the core. I was reshaping it in my image again, but cleaner this time. No excess, no vanity, no compromises. At the same time, I quietly bought back a number of the offshore assets she had sold during the chaos under different holding names. I didn't want the media circus. I wanted the legacy returned piece by piece. One of those properties was a historic brownstone in the heart of the city. The same place we had stayed in during our honeymoon. Long before the money complicated things, it was vacant, untouched, still had the same scent of cedar and old books. I signed the papers and didn't say a word to anyone. Some things you don't reclaim for power, you reclaim them for peace. But peace wasn't a guarantee. The media still circled like wolves. Rumors spun faster than facts. There were whispers that Anita might resurface, maybe in Europe, maybe under a rebranded name. I didn't follow. I didn't need to. Her chapter was closed on my side. If she chose to rewrite her story in another city, under another spotlight, let her. But here, in this city, the truth was fixed. Then came the hearing, not the messy divorce proceedings. Those were over. This was different, a formal arbitration, overseen by a federal panel, reviewing the fraud allegations surrounding her time at Langston Properties. She didn't contest the documents, didn't deny the audio files. Her lawyers tried to deflect, claim misunderstandings, clerical errors, and bad advice. But the panel wasn't interested in theater. After 2 hours, they delivered their findings, full exoneration for my name and full accountability placed where it belonged. On hers. There were no cameras, no applause, just paperwork and a signature. But for me, it felt like a clearing of air that had been stale for years. That night, I went back to the mansion. I'd avoided it. Even after she left, it felt too contaminated by memory. But something in me wanted to see it now, empty, mine again, stripped of her presence. The foyer echoed with my footsteps. I turned on the lights. Everything was as she left it. The modern art, the designer rugs, the marble she fought so hard to claim in court. But now that it was silent, it all looked cheap. The value wasn't in the materials. It was in the meaning. And the meaning had rotted the day she turned it into a trophy. I walked through every room, then I stopped in the library, my favorite place in the entire estate. She'd never liked it, said it was too cold, too quiet. But that was exactly why I loved it. Floor-to-ceiling shelves, walnut paneling, a desk that once belonged to a 19th century judge. Behind that desk, in the drawer she never found, was a small envelope I'd sealed 5 years ago. I had forgotten it until that moment. Inside was a photo, the kids laughing in the garden. On the back, in my handwriting, "Build for them." Not for her, I smiled, and not with joy, but with recognition. This war had never been about Anita. It had been about protecting the future from her. That weekend, I invited Chloe and Ethan over. No pressure, no court orders, Just an open door? They came. Chloe was quiet at first, more grown than I remembered. She carried herself like someone who had learned too much, too soon. Ethan was taller now, less bouncy, more cautious. We didn't talk about the court cases. We didn't talk about their mother. We just existed. I cooked them dinner. Pasta, simple, nostalgic. We played a board game we used to love. Chloe won, of course. Ethan accused her of cheating, which made her laugh. And for a few hours the mansion didn't feel haunted. Before they left, Chloe stopped in the hallway and looked up at a portrait. One of the few Anata hadn't taken down. It was a painting of the house from the outside, bathed in golden light. "Do you think this place can ever feel normal again?" she asked. I didn't lie. "Not normal," I said, "but honest. And that's better." She nodded. Ethan hugged me goodbye. Chloe lingered, then did the same. I stood in the doorway for a long time after they left, not because I was mourning, because I was healing. The next day I received an anonymous package at the office. No note, just a flash drive inside. I had it scanned for malware, then opened the contents. It was a video file. Anata, sitting in what looked like a rented apartment in Paris. Her voice was soft, her eyes distant. It wasn't meant for publication. This was raw. "I know you won't answer this," she said, "and I'm not asking for you to." She paused. "Look down, you were right. About everything. I thought I could rewrite the ending. I thought if I just moved fast enough, smiled wide enough, no one would look too closely." Another pause. I lost. Not just the court cases. I lost the version of myself I liked. I became someone who needed to win at all costs. Even if the cost was you. Then she looked directly at the camera. "Don't show this to the kids. Not yet, maybe one day. When they're old enough to understand what it means to ruin something and try to survive the wreckage." The file ended. I closed it, transferred it to the secure archive, and I didn't feel triumph. I felt distance, like she was already part of a past I no longer lived in. Revenge isn't the point. It's the clarity that comes after. The stillness once you've taken back your name, your legacy, your children's trust, the silence that finally feels earned. New Year's Eve came quietly. No confetti, no midnight countdown, no champagne toast. Just me and the brownstone, the one I reclaimed in silence, standing by the window as snow fell in slow, lazy spirals over the city. The world seemed distant, like it had exhaled something it had been holding too long, and so had I. There were no more court dates circled on the calendar. No more press clippings, subpoenas, or smear campaigns to respond to. My name had been cleared, my company restored. My children had begun to return to me. Not with blind trust, but with something deeper. Curiosity, forgiveness in early bloom. Anata had vanished from the headlines. Her silence was her final strategy. Whether out of dignity or defeat, I didn't know. I didn't need to. Some ghosts don't deserve resurrection. What mattered now was what came after. Langston Properties was operating cleaner than ever. I'd handed operational control to a new CEO, a woman who came from humble roots like I had, and retained only a founder's seat. I didn't need to be at the center anymore. Legacy, if done right, sustains without presence. I wasn't building for ego now. I was building for permanence. I took walks again, real ones, not power strides between meetings, but slow, aimless steps through parks and along the river. I started seeing things, the way trees bent in wind, how light filtered through high-rise reflections, things I hadn't noticed in years. And one morning, Chloe called. Not a text, not a cautious reply to a letter, a real phone call. "Hey," she said, voice small. "Do you have time this weekend?" I didn't ask what for. I just said yes. She came by with Ethan, this time without school bags or jackets zipped too tight, like they weren't afraid of staying long. We talked about music, school, even politics. Real conversations, nothing scripted or forced. And when Ethan asked me if I remembered the treehouse we built, I laughed. "Barely," I said. "But I remember falling off the ladder," he grinned. "You told Mom not to tell anyone." "She didn't," Chloe said, "but she took a picture." The mention of her name didn't sink the room. It just passed through, like wind through an open door. After they left, I stood in the quiet and realized something profound. You can rebuild your world without rebuilding the lie it used to live under. You don't need to restore the fantasy. just the foundation. In the weeks that followed, I finalized the estate restructuring. The mansion was sold, not out of necessity, but closure. I kept the library's furniture, the drawing Chloe once made, and the handwritten letter from myself that said, "Build for them, not for her." I moved everything into the brownstone. There, I began writing, not a memoir, not a confession, but a manual of sorts, something for my children to read when they're older. Not to justify my war, but to explain it. Not to vilify their mother, but to show the anatomy of betrayal, survival, and stillness. I didn't want to be remembered as a man who lost his empire and clawed it back. I wanted to be remembered as a man who didn't let a lie become the last word. One night, I returned to the digital safe for the final time. Inside were the files that started it all. The watch recordings, the bank trail, the documents, and her final video from Paris. I watched it again, not because I needed to, but because closure is never one act. It's a quiet, layered undoing. She looked younger in that video, not in her face, in her voice. The mask had dropped, and behind it was someone still trying to understand herself. But I wasn't there to finish her story. I was there to finish mine. I encrypted the drive, sealed the safe, and had it shipped to a law firm with instructions. Only release if ever legally required. Otherwise, let it disappear when I do. That was my final move. Not vengeance, control. Not rage. Stillness. Because the truth is, the most complete revenge isn't fire, it's absence, it's her name never spoken in rooms that used to be hers, it's her photos slowly disappearing from timelines and headlines. It's the silence when someone asks, "Whatever happened to," and no one quite remembers. That's what I built. That's what I earned. And now, as the new year begins, I don't look back with anger. I don't flinch when I hear her name, or pause when I pass the places we used to love. I don't need to. I made peace with it, not because she deserved it, but because I did. So if you're watching this, listening, reading, or simply wondering if there's life after betrayal, understand this. You don't need to destroy them. You just need to survive them, because nothing haunts a betrayer more than watching the person they tried to break stand taller in the silence they left behind. And now, I stand. If you've ever been burned by someone who smiled through their betrayal, if you've rebuilt from the ashes without needing applause, if you believe that stillness can be sharper than rage, like this video, share it with someone who's fighting their own quiet war. Subscribe if you believe the truth doesn't need to shout to be heard. Comment below. What's the coldest revenge you've ever seen pulled off? And tell me, where are you watching from?